Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Between Sundays with Brian Hughes. You are listening to the last episode in this series we've been doing on marriage. It's been a lot of fun, gotten a lot of great insight, had some great conversation with both Brian and Susan in our latest episodes. As always, if you've missed any of them or you just stumbled upon this episode as your first one, go back and check out the whole series. Again, we haven't been, they are all kind of isolated, but there's a lot of great information in them. So go back, check them out. Today, though, we're doing something special because recently, Brian, you asked people online their biggest questions, really, about marriage and the relationships they're in, or maybe relationships that people they love are in. So we're going to do a little Q&A with you. So a big smorgasbord of just questions that you, the listener, have submitted. So thank you for that. Thank you for reaching out to Brian and doing that. Anytime, there's probably a comment feature on the platform you're listening to. You can leave comments if you have another question or a response or whatever. We look at those. I'll especially look at those and would love to interact in that way if another question is born out of this. But we got a lot. So we're just going to get...
Yeah, there's no way we're going to make it through this whole list.
Definitely not. So if you ask a question, you didn't hear it, it's no offense. Your question was awesome. And we'll definitely do more Q&A type stuff as we go.
Yeah.
So, maybe it'll appear in a later episode. But anyway, you got a lot of questions. So I'm just going to ask them.
Okay.
You answer, obviously, and we'll go back and forth
Sounds
like that. The first one that I have on my list, I'm just going to start with that one. It says, how do you help people how do you help people, like I guess you specifically, when only one person is interested in working on a problem in the relationship? What do you say to them when that happens? They come to you and say, I've been trying, but they're not interested in this. How do you actually approach that?
Yeah. So on the one hand, and I've had this happen a lot.
Yeah.
So when couples come to see me, and I used to do a lot of this as our church has gotten larger, I do less of it these days. And I tell people, look, you really need to go see a skilled marriage counselor. I'm going to, just right from the get-go, Elijah, I think I'll take a tangent here and just say pastors have some skill in counseling. We are not counselors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a really important distinction because I often say to people, you need to have brain surgery and you've come to see your family doctor. Would you want your family doctor cracking your head open? Of course not. Nobody would do that.
Yeah.
So pastors are like general practitioners. We know some stuff. We have some tools, but we're not the skilled person when you need counseling. So that's where I always start. But I always say to a couple, there are two questions that really matter, and they're the only questions that matter in terms of your marriage becoming amazing. And that is question number one, do you want your marriage to be great? And question number two, are you willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen?
Yeah.
When two people answer both questions yes, and when they mean it, because almost everyone says yes to both questions, but not everyone means yes to the second question.
Right.
It's, are you willing to do what it takes to make your marriage great is always really hard to live out.
Sure. You got to actually.
That's right. That's where the rubber meets the road. But I have had couples come to see me where one couple answered no. One of the side of the couple said, no, I don't think I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And that really gets to the question because most people don't say no, but they do live no.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everybody says yes, but when the rubber meets the road, they're just really not willing to do. Some people are not willing to do everything that it takes. So that gets to the question. What if my answer is yes, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, but my spouse is really not? And so now we have sort of a one-sided effort. And what do we do? And so my answer to the question is always some version of this. Your job has never been to fix your spouse anyway. So when you got married, I'm going to put this in spiritual terms, when we believe that when two people get married, they made a mutual commitment to God. And that's why this is a three-way covenant. Really, God is in the center of it. And so in this situation, I would say to the spouse, your job becomes to do everything you can working on you.
Yeah.
And what we hope is that that the intervention of God will happen so that your spouse will say, no matter how I tried for our marriage to go in a different direction, in a wrong direction or end or whatever, you kept being the noble person. You always took the high road. You always treated me with honor and respect, and I want whatever you have.
Yeah.
Now, that's not really a strategy that you can deploy. It's really more like I'm just going to work on me. It's the only option I have.
Yeah, yeah.
And many times the other spouse, their heart becomes softer as they see that lived out. Now, it sure is easy to talk about. It's a whole nother thing.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
It's hard enough when both people
difficult.
are willing to do all the work. That's hard enough. When it's just one of you, it becomes a matter of stamina. Yeah. Like how much do you have in the tank, and how long can you really last like this?
Right.
And I can't answer that question. And our job here, my job here in this episode is, really in the whole podcast, is just to tell the truth, not to sugarcoat things. This is hard. Mm-hmm. It is doable, and it often produces fruit, but it's a long game, not a short game. And that's the answer to the question.
Yeah. We actually talked about some of those principles in our episode on divorce.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
If you have this question, or you're the one that asked it, you definitely need to make sure you listen to that one as we go, particularly the part about you just doing what you need to do.
That's right.
Because you can't fix necessarily the other person.
That's right.
Spend a lot of time talking about that. And it sounds exceedingly difficult.
It's so hard. I mean, I've watched many, many couples just struggle through it. And I just have to say, I think stamina is the right word. Every long once in a while, I meet somebody who just has this sort of divine level perseverance, and they can go the distance a long time. Most people just can only make it so far when their spouse is just not participating and not coming alongside them. And I can appreciate that.
For sure. I do think it's one of those things where, as we're recording this, we're at the tail end of a series we've been doing at the church about when life gets hard. Mm-hmm. And you've talked about, and I'm going to talk about in a message I have coming up in this series, about just the idea of taking the next step toward a harvest. But we haven't really gotten necessarily into what the harvest might be, because that depends, obviously, who you're talking to and what season you're going through. What I'm going to talk about in my message, not to go on a little bit of a tangent, is that those steps aren't they're not just a means to an end.
That's right.
If you think about it and you just say, take steps toward the harvest, it can sound like, oh, I just got to endure this.
That's right.
Until I get there. And yes, there is some enduring you have to do on that journey, particularly in this context. But every step you take on that path is actually forming you as well. Mm-hmm. And so you're actually ready for the harvest when you get there. And so I think in this case, if you yourself, even though it's probably the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life, actually do take those steps seriously, you, at the very least, will get molded into a better person on the other side.
Yes.
And obviously it's still hard. There's not going to be a great outcome if you do never reach a resolution with your spouse, but you will, as hard as it is to say, will be better for it, just as a person. Yeah,
it's funny you should use the word, you should talk about enduring. And I had this guy, there's a guy in our church, he's gone now, as in heaven, and he was an older guy named Jim Frazier. Mm-hmm. And he was around for a good long while, and then they moved into a retirement community. And Jim, I was talking about marriage one day in a message, and I talked about enduring. You got to endure, and you got to push through, and da-da-da-da. And he came to me afterwards, and he said, you are using the wrong word. He said, marriage is not about enduring. Marriage is about persevering. Mm-hmm. And I have never forgotten that. Yeah. Because enduring is like, oh my gosh, it's just drudgery, but I got to put up with it, and because I'm going to make it to the end. Perseverance is we're in it to win it. Yeah. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive. It's just framing it in a different way. I've never forgotten that. And I've never talked about it the same way since.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a good follow-up from someone else.
All right.
You mentioned counseling at the beginning of your answer. We got a question.
Yep.
When is it time to get counseling?
Well, there's an easy answer to this. If you're asking the question, now is the time.
There you go.
And here's the other thing. We have this rule in our marriage, and I try to encourage every couple to have this rule in their marriage. If one spouse raises their hand and says, I think we need to go to counseling, there is only one response from the other spouse, and it is, absolutely, let's go. Where I see problems happen is when one spouse says, I think we need help, let's go see a counselor, and the other spouse says, nope, I'm not going. We don't need help. Why do we need help? We need to fix our own problems. We know the answers already, all the things. And I just say, that's a foul. When one spouse raises their hand and says we should go to counseling, the other spouse's answer is yes, let's go. And so this person, if they're asking the question, the answer is, if you're asking the question, it's time to go to counseling. That's it.
You've arrived.
You've arrived.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll move on to another one. This one's just random, out of the blue, pick from the list. What boundaries should you have with your in-laws, friends, or work? Basically, I would assume any sort of relationship outside of the marriage relationship.
Well, when we talked about parenting, when we talked about your kids in marriage, I said this thing in that episode. I said you should never allow anything, including your children, to divide you in marriage.
Yeah.
Well, let's put that in the context of this question. Marriage should not, nothing should come between the husband and the wife. Jesus himself said, what God has put together, let no one pull apart. Not your mama or your dad or your coworker or your best friend or whatever. No one should pull apart the marriage. So if the marriage feels like it's being divided by, and this, I'll tell you the place where this most often happens is with a parent. With a parent or an in-law, whatever. And I think that this is really tricky because obviously it is unhealthy to create cutoff with a spouse's parents. And I have seen that happen where one of the spouses was so threatened or jealous by, let's just use an example, by his mom, that she made the wife creates a situation where the husband can't really stay connected to his mom. They have to have cutoff in order to make the wife happy. Well, that's incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah.
Incredibly unhealthy. And I would never argue that that's the way to do this. On the other hand, I've seen all kinds of marriages where one of the parents interferes with the marriage. And so I said to my kids all know this, when you go through difficult days, and you will because every marriage does, you should have a place that you can go talk, but it can never be me or your mom. Because we can't be the people who are perceived as driving a wedge between you and your spouse. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. If somebody's getting beaten or abused, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of we're not getting along, we can't seem to find common ground, I just need to vent for a minute about him or her because I can't stand it when she does this, or we can't participate in any of that. I don't want to hear any of that. My job as a parent is to support your marriage, to help you drive closer together, not further apart. And so I've seen lots and lots of interference by parents who just will not let their kid thrive in their own marriage, but insists on interference, and that's just a foul. So I really encourage couples to draw good and healthy boundaries with everyone else in their lives, and the key is to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't have your own friends. It's not that you can't stay connected to your parents. It's not that you can't go out after work with your coworkers. It's that how are we setting ourselves up in marriage where I feel comfortable with what you're doing? There's a complete transparency, total trust, and you're not staying away from me an unhealthy amount of time.
Right.
And that's not a defined amount except within your marriage. The key is to have lots of conversations about it.
Yeah. And I think, you brought up the example of your kids talking to you. It would also be literally impossible for you to not be, at least have a shred of bias.
Well, of course. And anybody that says they don't is just not being honest. They're my kids. Of course I'm biased towards them.
Even if you tried your best not to, it's just within you. And that's true for really any relationship you have. That's why something like a counselor or a pastor, if they're doing their jobs they're going to be the objective voice. And that's why you would go see them in the first place for that. At least that's a big part of it. Another question. How can you put romance back into a marriage?
We read this book by, I think it was Les and Leslie Perot, who wrote a book. It might have been Dennis Rainey. Anyway, the book is called Rekindling the Romance.
Okay.
And it's really for couples that have reached like the 10-year mark.
Okay.
Because there's this phenomenon that happens, and we talked about this, Elijah, a good bit in an episode about kids, and you're the stage where your kids are, you're raising your kids, you've invested all this time in your kids, and the focus of your life kind of moves away from your marriage and becomes your kids. And after like the 10-year mark, there's usually 7 to 10 years, there's usually this sort of lull in terms of romance.
Yeah.
And it's not just about sex or physical stuff. It's about all of it. It's about the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wrote this book about called Rekindling the Romance, and it really spends a lot of time focusing on both the activity and the quantity of time that you're spending together. So they talked a lot about, finding ways not just to have time where you're sitting in the same room, but where you're doing things that are fun together.
Yeah.
So Susan and I don't think we've talked about this in an episode yet. For the listener, if I've said this before, welcome to Susan's life. She hears every story like 20 times. But years ago, we decided we just fell in love with John Grisham, and we just started reading John Grisham books out loud together. Last night, we're going on this big vacation this year, just the two of us for 2 weeks. And I said, we have got to get the next John Grisham book. When does it come out? So she pulls out her phone and she says, well, he's got two big projects coming out this year. One of them's nonfiction, which I like, but it's not really the same.
Sure.
And it comes out like next month. But his fiction book doesn't come out until September. And we're going on vacation like July. So I have to find a new author now, because the thing that we like to do that really makes us feel connected and it's just fun together for us is we read well-written, sort of high drama fiction books out loud together.
Yeah.
That's our thing.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, the first thing I would say to a couple that says, hey, how do I put romance back in my marriage, is you have to have an open conversation with your spouse about it. You got to sit down. Somebody's got to be willing to say, I feel like things are a little stale. That's not an indictment.
Yeah.
It's not saying you're a bad person or you're neglecting me or
it's your
you've
fault.
done something wrong or it's your fault. It's not saying any of that. It just says, this is how I feel. And the other spouse should say, help me understand more about that. Let's unpack it a little bit. Ask some probing questions. Listen well. And come to a place where you say, let's figure out what to do about it. It is just that simple. It's not rocket science. And I think where most people get stuck is they get defensive. Well, what do you mean I'm not doing it? Are you saying I'm not being a good husband? No, she's not saying that. And by the way, oftentimes when it has to do with romance, oftentimes it is the wife's perspective that she feels like we're not having enough romance. When it comes to sex and physical stuff like that, physical intimacy, it's often the husband who's saying those things. But the getting to the solution either way is about having a conversation where nobody is defensive and where the other side isn't attacking. Like I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying this is how I feel. And are there some things that we could do, some steps we could take? And I would just say to a couple in those situations is, okay, start experimenting, do some stuff, see if it works.
Yeah.
And try something else. And your fallback position is, I always say read a book. I think Rekindling the Romance is what I would recommend to this couple. Like, go read that book. It was extremely helpful for me and Susan, and we've referenced it several times, many times along the way. But your fallback position after that is go see a counselor.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, not that this is an endorsement of any of them, but there are, that every couple goes through this, because all over the place there are
That's right.
tools for this very thing.
That's right.
There's like quick, let's draw a card and here's some
right.
random date idea or anything like that. And so the idea of just trying something.
Yeah.
There really is no, I guess, excuse is the best way to say it.
That's right. Because there's so many tools.
There's so many.
We for a brief time, Susan and I did this app, which I really liked. We just didn't do it very consistently, and we've got a pretty good system. We didn't really need it, but anyway, it was called Paired.
Yeah,
and
I did that.
You did that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really helpful. I think for a couple in this situation, sometimes what you've got, if I could use a car analogy, is the car's been sitting in the driveway for a while, and no one has started the motor.
Yeah,
and so you get in, you turn the key, and the thing just turns over. And what you need is something to kind of help the engine start again, and then. It's running.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we did get a few questions about intimacy.
Okay.
So it might be a little bit of a segue since you brought it up.
Yep.
This question, I think, is a good one. It's probably particularly a lot of guys I would think are thinking this, but women as well. How important is physical intimacy? And the follow-up is what if we're not on the same page about it?
Yeah. Well, it's really tricky, and I will say that the ultimate in marriage, we talked about this one episode, the ultimate place that a husband and wife both need to be is when you get to the place where you can submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, which are the 9 most important key words to making your marriage amazing, by God's design, then what happens is she is thinking, how can I serve him? What does he need? And he is thinking, how can I serve her? What does she need?
Yeah.
And everyone's needs get met. That's an ideal situation, but I will say it's not a fairy tale. It actually does work. And this is really how Susan and I have made this work. Specifically relative to sexual intimacy, I'll say it's important to note that the physical intimacy need of a man changes over the course of his life. And this is what I think most women don't understand, because I love that we can be real on this podcast. This is the truth. When your husband is 23 years old and he's crawling all over you every day, it's a function of where he is relative to his own biology and his own testosterone level, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for women who are in that situation, I as a guy, I'm going to tongue in cheek say to you, I'm sorry to say that will come to an end. That season will come to an end. And that doesn't mean he won't want sex anymore, but it will come to an end that he will stop crawling all over you every day. This is going to happen. This is just a biological certainty. It's just the way things work. Now, he probably will always have a greater sexual appetite than you do. Maybe, probably. That is not 100% of the time. However, I will say that it's important that couples talk about this. This is where I think the breakdown often happens, is with these unmet expectations. She doesn't understand where she thinks he's unusual. And I've talked to lots of women like this, that she thinks there's something wrong with him. But I'm just saying, ladies, if that's you, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just the function of being a guy. I had a mom say to me one time, she was talking about her teenage kid, and he was probably 15 or 16 or whatever. And she was kind of lamenting her son and all his whatever, testosterone, whatever. And I said to her, do you have any idea what that's like? And she said, I don't. I said, no, you don't. You really don't. But when you're a young man, it's just hard. It's just something you're thinking about all the time. And you can't overcome it. So, on the one hand, there's nothing wrong with him. On the other hand, while your job is to serve him, you have to do that in a healthy way. The marriage has to take care of each other in a healthy way.
Right.
And so the key to that is conversation and to talk about expectations. So I think it's helpful in a marriage to talk about what do you expect to happen today? What do you hope will happen today? How can we work together so that your needs are met? And if I'm talking from husband to wife, so that the husband's needs are met and the wife is not completely worn out. At the same time, recognizing that she's raising kids and she probably got a job and she's got all these other things too.
Yeah. And
it takes a lot of emotional capacity for her. This is what most guys don't understand, particularly when they're in their 20s, is that for him, especially in that age era, it's mostly physical. For her, it's highly emotional. So Gary Smalley used to say, I think it was Gary Smalley used to say, when it comes to sex and affection, you can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. And so it's important that we hold these things in balance. I think that there is often a disparity, particularly when you're young, in terms of expectation and need for sexual intimacy. It does tend to balance out. And I often, I will say this last piece. It's important that a husband and wife have conversation about this, because it is not uncommon for there to be some stumbling blocks in the past for one or both of these people, including things like abuse that have never been discussed. And until that stuff gets on the table in a healthy way, and if it's real abuse, if it's sexual abuse in a counselor's office kind of way,
right,
then you're always going to have some unhealth when it comes to physical intimacy, because there's an unresolved issue or an undealt with issue. I don't mean to say that it can be resolved. That sexual abuse is something that kind of stays with you, but you can overcome the trauma of it to the point where you can be healthy, but not without some help. And so the whole key is to come back and to be able to have sort of uninhibited, real conversations about it, and oftentimes in the presence of a skilled counselor that can help you work through it.
Yeah, there's definitely a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
It's just the willingness to actually have the conversation.
That's right.
in a way that's, as you said, not threatening, not
Right.
accusatory,
Right.
not blaming the other
Not
person.
defensive.
And I think, I'm pretty sure you've said this, and we've said this on a previous episode, probably most of them. If we could just get to that point,
Mhm.
right, where we could do that
Mhm.
well, a lot of these things you would be able to work through.
That's exactly right.
And so,
That's
yeah,
exactly right.
I think a component of we need to talk about it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be an answer to all these.
Let me recommend a resource here before we leave this particular subject. Kevin Lehman wrote a book called Sheet Music.
Okay.
A little play on words
Gotcha.
with music,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And there's the cover picture. The cover of the book is like got these 4 feet hanging out of the back of a set of sheets on a bed. There's nothing graphic there at all. It's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to talk about it. But the whole book is about sex and in marriage, and it's in the context of the sort of the Christian worldview. So it's very biblically grounded, and that book was super helpful for me and Susan. To understand each other better when it came to physical intimacy, to get questions on the table that we didn't know how to ask. Super helpful. So for the couple that's in the stage where you feel like there's an incongruence with the way that you think about or expect or whatever, perform the whole bit when it comes to sexual intimacy, I would highly recommend that book as a place to say, let's start a conversation. This will be our guide.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Y'all should check that out for sure. All right, maybe time for a couple more.
Okay.
We will shift gears a little bit here. I think this one is fascinating for a lot of reasons. How do you know if you married the right person?
Yeah, the question implies that there is a right person.
Right.
And this is a highly controversial subject when it comes to theological narrative within the Christian community.
Yeah.
So
Eddie Flash, soulmate.
that's right. Like God picked one person just for you. And this is I wonder, Elijah, I'd love to know your perspective on this, because my perception is this is challenging for people like me and you, because we married so well, or I'll put it a different way. We seriously married up. You and I, we won the jackpot.
Amen.
And so when I think about all of my dysfunction for so many years and how broken I was, I can't imagine another person on the planet who could have both persevered, to use the word we used earlier, and found a way for our marriage to thrive and been more perfect for me. If ever there could be a case that God designed one person for another in lifelong marriage, it would have been Susan Payne marrying Brian Hughes.
Mm.
And yet, I am not convinced that God sort of pre-designs for every person that there is one person out there that he chose for them and sort of preordained it to come together.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure that's not the case, but I'm definitely not 100% sure that it is.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's definitely one of those mysteries, because what is obvious is that some people just are more compatible with each other than others, just based on personality and upbringing, culture, all that. You and Susan, you just clicked.
Yes.
For all kinds of different reasons.
That's right.
That many of them can just be traced back to where you grew up.
Right.
Your family system. Even though there are a lot of things that are opposite about you.
Right.
There are so many things that are very similar, and those things work together. That's true for Megan and I as well. Our families couldn't be any further from each other in terms of how they interact with each other, how open they are. And it's not like one is right and the other is wrong. I grew up in one, so I'm used to it. And she grew up in the other, she's used to it. And so when you put them together, they're very kind, but it is a little bit like oil and water. My mom is super extroverted. Nobody's a stranger. Her parents would rather be left alone, which again is fine.
Right.
It's not a problem. So you can see those things and say, well, we're not compatible in that way, but we balance each other out
right
in those terms.
Right.
As I know that you and Susan share a lot of that as well. For me, the answer to this question is I know I married the right person because I said yes.
Yeah.
And not saying that I knew she was my soulmate, therefore I said yes. But because I made the promise
That's right.
in front of God and in front of witnesses, they're the right person.
That's right.
Even if technically somebody out there, maybe on paper, I could be more compatible with.
Right.
It's the right person because I said yes.
I totally agree with that answer. If you're asking the question and you're already married, you married the right person.
Right.
Because we're not going back.
Exactly.
And I completely agree with that answer. Now, again, just being completely transparent, I have met with, and I've met with hundreds, probably now thousands of couples, and I've met with people and thought, man, these folks should have never gotten married.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen that.
Yeah,
and yet they did, and here they are.
Right.
And if we believe what we believe about God, that God is the ultimate reconciler, the ultimate healer, the ultimate heart changer, all the things, then why can't we believe that God would be willing, that God has the capacity to take two people who we can look back and say maybe we shouldn't have got married, but the fact is that we did.
We did.
Why can we not believe that God can turn that into something amazing and beautiful? Because he can.
Right.
And looking back and saying we shouldn't have gotten married is completely unhelpful at that point. It's just unhelpful.
Right. And I think that, as with anything in marriage or really any relationship, obviously we're talking about marriage here. There are some examples, like you mentioned earlier. If there's real abuse going on,
that's right.
There are threats, like that's outside of a little bit of the realm that we're talking about here. Like, so not saying suck it up, no matter what's going on.
I'm not.
However, by and large, most people aren't in that situation, thank goodness. And then I would say that this question is really playing with fire, because the natural next question is starting to think about, well, who would have been the right person? Right. Exactly. And now you're crossing the line.
That's right. I completely agree. I would just say you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's hard, and it's not shame for that popping through your mind. I'm sure that has happened to a lot of people, especially early on, or especially when you encounter your first real issue, like the honeymoon phase is over or whatever. This isn't about marriage. When I had my first kid, I've said this from the platform, when I had my first kid, one of my first thoughts was, holy crap, did we just make a mistake? You know what I mean? Like, and I feel bad for having thought that, but it's such a shift in who you are, and not to get on a tangent, but so I could see how that could happen in marriage, but you can't entertain that question.
Yeah, and I've said from the platform many times, if you've been married long enough, sooner or later you wake up one day and think, what am I doing?
Yeah, right.
I mean, because marriage can be hard and all the things. It can be, you go through seasons of struggle. I get that, but the commitment that we made on that day when we got married was not a light or a passing commitment. It was a lifelong promise, and therefore we are going to find a way to persevere and find a way to great marriage again. We had it once, and if we didn't have it once, we're going to find a way to have it for the first time. But we're in it together for the duration. That's it.
That's it. Amen. It's been a great series.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
There are a lot more questions you have. Sorry we can't get to all of them. Like I said, we'll do this kind of thing probably pretty regularly. Maybe not to end every series or anything like that, and we'll definitely make our way back around to marriage at some point. But thank you, Brian, for all your insight on that.
I love doing this.
And thank you for not only your questions, but for listening, for being a part of this. We start a new series next week on another one of your favorite topics.
Yep.
Leadership.
Yep. I'm really, really excited to talk about that. And I think it'll have application not just for people who are currently leaders, but for anybody, because there's a leadership capacity that everybody has, and everybody is a person of influence at some level. So, yeah.
Right. So a little bit of a gear shift, but I think you'll enjoy it, like we just said. So follow, like, subscribe, share, do the things, check out the resources we've mentioned, share these episodes with somebody you know, and let's keep going. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Brian, for your insight. We'll see you next time.